Welcome back to Train Simulator, where today we'll be having a look at what I think are the most iconic tank engines in the UK. In other words, these are the engines that I'd point to if someone asked me what best represents British tank engines. For this video I've lined up 4 060 tanks representing each of the big 4 railway companies, specifically the LB&SCR Terriers, Fowler 3F Jinty, GWR 5700 class, and the LNER J94. First in the lineup is the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway A1 class. 50 of these diminutive locomotives were built at Brighton Works between 1872 and 1880. The class was designed for and initially used on commuter services in South London, and were known for their fast acceleration amongst many other things. Of course, the A1s are better known as Terriers, a nickname that was derived from their distinctive exhaust beat. While withdrawals of these engines had already started as early as 1901, in the early 1910s, under the instruction of Douglas Earl Marsh, at least 12 Terriers were rebuilt with larger boilers. These rebuilt engines were designated as the A1X. Aside from the reboilering, other changes made included moving the sandboxes below the running plate, the removal of the condensing equipment from the smoke box, and a repaint in Marsh umber colours. With the introduction of the D1 class 042s and early LB&SCR electric multiple units, the Terriers soon found themselves displaced from their original duties on commuter trains. As time went on, most of them were sold to other operators, including the Isle of Wight Central, Kent and East Sussex, and Western Clevedon and Portishead railways. Consequently, they ended up carrying a huge variety of liveries. Take this one for example. The former number 54 Wadden was sold to the Southeastern and Chatham Railway in 1904 for use on the Sheppey Light Railway. This engine has since been preserved and was exported to Canada in 1963. She is now on display at the Expo Rail Museum in Quebec. In 1903, the former 46 Newington and 68 Clapham was sold to the London and South Western Railway and initially tested on the Lyme Regis branch. However, the Terriers were not suited to the steep grades and sharp curves on the line, which eventually became the domain of 3 Adams radial tanks. Other Terriers remained on the books when the LB&SCR became part of the Southern Railway in 1923. Incredibly, despite being well over 50 years old at this point, at least 14 of them survived into the British Railways era, which began in 1948. Some of these engines, such as the former No. 50 Whitechapel, survived on the Hayling Island branch right up until its closure in 1963, as, believe it or not, these were the only engines light enough to cross the timber bridge at Langstone Harbour. Another notable member of this class was the former No. 35 Morden, which became the Brighton Works shunter during the BR era. She was repainted back into improved engine green colours and became a minor celebrity amongst rail fans of the day. Despite this, the locomotive was scrapped at Eastleigh Works in 1963. But out of the 50 Terriers built, 10 have been preserved, including the former No. 40 Brighton and 46 Newington, which are based at the Isle of Wight Steam Railway. These two run on their Southern Railway guises as W11 Newport and W8 Freshwater respectively. No. 82 Box Hill is another notable survivor, and she is on display at the National Railway Museum in York. Next we have the famous Fowler 3F or Jinty. These were designed by Sir Henry Fowler, and an impressive 422 of them were built between 1924 and 1931, with the design being based on the old Midland Railway 2441 class. Initially, the War Department chose the Jinty as the standard World War II shunting locomotive, but later changed their minds and went for the Hunslet Austerity instead. Nevertheless, 8 of them were dispatched to France in 1940, but only 5 survived the war. Numbers 7456 and 7553 were converted to run on 5'3" gauge track and sent to Northern Ireland in 1944 and 1945 respectively. These two were classified as the Northern Counties Committee Y class. 417 Jinties survived into British Railways days, and a healthy 9 of them have been preserved, including 47298, which is normally based at the East Lancashire Railway. To represent the Great Western Railway, we have the 5700 class Pannier Tank. A staggering 863 of them were built between 1929 and 1950, having been designed by Charles Collett. Despite not being massive locomotives, they were just as much an iconic part of the GWR as were the Castle and King class 460s. The 5700s were used as shunters, but they could also run on branch lines and short mainline workings. The vast majority of them survived into the BR era, and withdrawals took place between 1956 and 1966. Some 5700s were sold to companies such as London Transport and the National Coal Board, with the LT Panniers surviving as late as 1971. This particular example, L89, formerly 5775, was preserved by the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, and is notable for having starred in the 1970 Railway Children film and an episode of Last of the Summer Wine, specifically the episode Full Steam Behind. So out of the 863 engines built, 16 have survived into preservation, including numbers 7714 and 9600. The latter returned to service in 1997, and between 1999 and 2018 she was often used on mainline excursions while being based out of Tyseley near Birmingham. As for 7714, she is currently operational and based at the Severn Valley Railway. Lastly, we have the LNER J94 class, except these are clearly not a native LNER design. The J94 class was formed in 1946, when the LNER bought 75 ex-War Department Hunslet Austerity 060 saddle tanks. This design dates back to at least 1943. When the LNER got their Austerities, they had them numbered in the 8006 to 8080 range, resulting in two of them, 8007 and 8022, having the same numbers that would later be taken up by KiwiRail's two DXR locomotives. Out of the 485 Hunslet Austerities that were built, an impressive 70 have been preserved, including two J94s, namely 8077 and 8078. Another survivor is WD192 Wagoner, which is based at the Isle of Wight Steam Railway. Before we wrap things up, I'd like to give an honourable mention to the LSWR Adams Radial tank and Great Western 1400 class. These designs date back to 1882 and 1932 respectively, but sadly only one Adams Radial tank is preserved, compared to 4 Great Western auto tanks. And that brings us to the end of our brief-ish look at 4 iconic British tank engines. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.